Welcome to Philly Coco Presents Side Project Spotlight, episode 19. This is a developer's journey to making cool stuff. We are your navigators through this open sea journey to your personal development metaverse. I'm Kotaro.
I'm Steve.
And I'm Aaron.
And we are Philly Coco, a Philadelphia-based Coco Heads community focused on Apple development. That primarily, but not exclusively, means iOS, Mac, tvOS, and watchOS development. Philly Coco's true desire is to take you higher on your own development journey.
Nice.
All right.
When you said OpenSea, I was like, are you making a crypto reference?
I was making multiple crypto references at this point.
References.
How many memes can you spot in that one?
Yeah.
I know, right? I was, the coffee kicked in at just at the right moment.
That could be like a game for the listeners here. How many memes can you pick out in Kotaro's intros?
I know. Oh, that'll just be the evolution of this intro at this point.
Yeah. If I sound a little weird on the recordings because I've been sick during WWDC, which I guess is what we're going to be talking about today, partly.
Yeah. So WWDC just wrapped up, and we are more or less recovering, particularly Steve here.
Seriously, how did I get like the conference crud when I was just sitting at home alone, watching them online? Somehow I still caught something. Not the COVID.
Yeah,
I tested.
It's part of that augmented reality experience.
Yeah, you caught it through the metaverse.
It's been rough, but I've been gaining solace by watching some videos of some really cool stuff this year. I think it was one of my favorite WWDCs.
Interesting. Okay. Well, it didn't strike me as something that was like, M2 is a big deal, but in terms of just the sort of big splashy software, there wasn't like a new version of core data. Sorry, Sean. I know you were hoping for that one.
That was the one thing I was really disappointed about.
But there was like nothing. There was nothing that I thought was like, whoa, explosively, revolutionary, quote unquote. But I thought there was a lot of good stuff overall.
But what made it my favorite was just the combination of things. It really felt like a turning point for developers because Apple put up on the screen. I think it was during the Developer State of the Union. Like the best way they say to develop apps was SwiftUI and was it the Xcode previews? And that's a little bit of marketing stuff, and they do support all the other ways, and they're built on top of each other. But point is, that was the first time Apple just came out. If you remember a few years prior when SwiftUI was new, and they were a little cagey about it, like cross-platform stuff. Is it going to be SwiftUI? Is it going to be something else? What's the other thing for cross-platform that I'm misremembering in my illness fog here?
Catalyst?
Yes, that's right, Catalyst. Remember they were a little cagey about that?
Right,
because they're both useful in different circumstances, but they just came out in front and said that, and that to me made this really memorable WWDC. Pushing a new paradigm.
Yeah, it was sort of confusing at the time when they brought up Catalyst, and we were just like, okay, we have SwiftUI, which is, sort of like cross-platform across the board, and then this Catalyst thing was much more of a, like, if you have a UI kit type of app, you can now get it on, you can, like, with one checkbox and a few tweaks, you can get it on macOS, right? That was what they meant by cross-platform in that context.
But I believe we called it on our preview episode. We said SwiftUI was going to become like the main way of developing apps.
I mean, if you didn't see the writing on the wall before, like when you open up the beta of Xcode and you open up a template project and you see the options of saying like SwiftUI is the default, and they hide, they really do their best to hide like Storyboard and Objective-C and UI, anything UIKit related in the drop downs. I mean, you still can get access to it, but it's not the default when you open these things up. So that I thought was fascinating.
Yeah, and it's not like you can't do things in UIKit. You still would have to, and isn't like SwiftUI built on top of a lot of their existing stuff? It's not all 100% re-implemented from like scratch, right? Like some of it internally might be using existing UIKit things.
I think a good chunk of it is.
Yeah. So I mean, it's not like it's they're Apple's iterative. They build on top of it, but the way you build something with SwiftUI, despite how it's implemented internally, it's just very different than the way you build things using straight UIKit. And to push that as to say this is the way we think as Apple is the best way of building apps, new apps. I think they meant new apps, not like go rewrite all your current apps unless that's a good idea for you. Then I don't think they meant that. They meant like if you're going to build something new, we assume you're going to use SwiftUI, and we're going to build our tools for that.
I mean, it was sort of telling when you looked at a lot of the video sessions that they provided, and you did a search for UIKit for that. You might get like a few, maybe like 2, 3 that are specific to UIKit. But then when you did a search for like SwiftUI, you would see about maybe 8, 10 plus.
It's the new hotness.
Yeah. And a lot of the new stuff, like I guess was like app intents, looked very much designed for SwiftUI. I don't know. You've messed with it a little bit, Aaron. Like you probably would have better context around that.
A little bit. It's kind of how they kind of merge the WidgetKit and watch complications into one thing now, and kind of replace the old app intents that use a lot of Objective-C code in the back end. So it's very SwiftUI like. Everything is structs, and
I mean, it seems a lot easier to sort of reason through now than before.
Except for the thing, it seemed like it was broken in the beta. Like it didn't seem like it worked at all. Like even in the sample app, I was trying to get it working in a project, and then to replace some old app intents, I couldn't get that working. And then I tested the food truck sample app, trying to get the app intents working. They didn't work there. I created like a project from scratch with like, you just need 2 methods in your struct to get your app intent to work. And that didn't work either. So I don't know and apparently there's some known issue but it said, do it this way. Use the finish method in your perform to get the app intents to work. Because there's like different ways you can different things you can do when your intent finishes. And there's like different things you can do. And it doesn't seem like any of them were working. It just acted like it wasn't there. Like when it says open the Shortcuts app and search for your app, and your thing should come up automatically, and then it wasn't coming up. So I don't know what's going on with app intents. I guess they're still that's why it's beta stuff. So maybe in beta 2 they'll be working.
Hopefully. Yeah. I mean it's beta. This tends to happen.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of interesting things we talked about. Passkey was another interesting technology that sort of to migrate everyone to sort of more of a passwordless experience where a lot of the authentication is done on device.
Right. But before we get to Passkey, what about the app intents theoretically is really cool. I don't know if everybody listening necessarily understands what app intents are unless they watch the video. So what can you do with it, Aaron? And why are we so excited about it?
It's the replacement for the old Siri custom intents. And it's you can basically encapsulate any feature in your app that's like a frequently used task as a shortcut that automatically gets added to the Shortcuts app with just like a few lines of code. Before, when you made a custom intent, you had to like go into the Shortcuts app, add the shortcut, or rely on like the built-in UI of like add this to Siri. If you didn't like press one of the buttons or go into the Shortcuts app, like it wasn't available. Your custom intents weren't available until you explicitly told Shortcuts through one of these methods that you should add it. Now you can supposedly, when it's working, just put make this shortcut an app shortcut, and it automatically gets added. Just from code.
Yeah, like you wouldn't see it in the Shortcut app.
You would see it in the Shortcuts app, but you wouldn't have to like go and add it.
You wouldn't have to go and add like in the new version.
You would still see it if you open the Shortcuts app. If you add it as an app shortcut in code, it would be in the Shortcuts app by default when it was installed. So
it's
like
demo,
doing all that for you.
Yeah, the demo in the what is it, the dive into app intents, I think was one. It was very cool.
Yeah.
The ability to compose your shortcuts is a powerful feature that I don't use enough.
Yeah.
There's a limit of 10. I don't know why 10 is the magic number. in SwiftUI like stuff, but apparently there's also a limit of 10
like
shortcuts.
10 shortcuts for your app.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. SwiftUI.
I guess maybe they don't want to like overwhelm. I don't know if it's related to the 10 parameters in SwiftUI thing, or just they don't want you to bury everybody else's shortcuts with like 50 shortcuts from your app or something. Probably that. Not. I don't think it's related to the SwiftUI thing.
I mean, that also makes a lot of sense, regardless. Like both points make a lot of sense, but
that's cool. But yeah, so we're interested in that because we think that could be useful. But
yeah,
I know, Aaron, you've done more SiriKit stuff. So that was cool. I was actually excited about that, the App Intense one. And then you were saying Passkey.
Passkey was interesting.
It was really interesting.
WeatherKit was interesting, where you can now access Weather API, Apple's Weather API, whichever one they bought. It was a Dark Sky, to very easily pull in some weather data and then display it on your app for whatever reason, or even have your app act on those weather data. So maybe your game can have weather generated from from actual weather APIs. So if it's raining in the game, if it's raining outside, maybe it can rain in the game, as an example of a cool idea you could do.
Yeah. I mean, you could take into account the weather for all kinds of stuff. Like if you were, for instance, building a to-do app of some sort, you could take into account what actions I might be able to do today.
So like if I want to jog for like
or do yard work. I don't know. Like, and you can't really do that if it's pouring rain. So
that's a fascinating point.
Yeah, I mean, you could take location into. Well, I don't want to derail we're still in the WWDC section, but just came to me if you're talking about like getting things done, that methodology, you tend to have tools and places and people that are associated with your tasks, and that you need them in order to accomplish them.
Mm-hmm.
So location is one of those things. Like I can do these tasks at this particular location.
That is pretty fascinating.
So why not weather as being one of those inputs?
Right.
Constraints. Anyway, that's what came to my mind with WeatherKit. I thought it's kind of cool because now it's also very affordable compared to it's actually, was it like half what Dark Sky was, is what I was seeing online. I couldn't confirm that, but
I haven't been paying attention to the prices, but I know that I know it's relatively cheap. So or certainly as a developer, it's reasonable to, let's look at like $500K
for free. I think
like a 500 like requests for free. So
which will probably get you pretty far if you cache them, right?
Yeah, that's true, and you don't hit it so hard. The other thing that came out, like Swift Charts for SwiftUI, which is a very dynamic, customizable chart library chart. What's it called? Like a chart.
Swift Charts.
Yeah,
but we didn't really talk about what Passkey was. We just kind of mentioned it.
Oh, sorry.
Passkey is the future replacement of passwords, like not just better passwords, but like an elimination of passwords, and it's part of a standard that Apple has been working on with other companies as part of, I think, the FIDO Alliance. Mm-hmm. It's your server has to implement WebAuthn. I don't know how you're supposed to pronounce that.
I think it's just web authentication.
Web authentication, yeah. But I always see it listed as WebAuthn.
Yeah, that's how they spell it for some reason.
So you have to implement that, and then it's a variation of like public-private, certificate exchange or key exchange. So the public key goes to the server, and you keep your private one in Apple's iCloud keychain on device, synchronized between devices, I guess in the secure enclave or whatever they store it. And then, you never generate a password. You never have to remember anything. I guess you need to remember your password for iCloud, but that's about it. So it's like your one password.
Oh, one password, huh?
No, but it's cool because it allows you to, once you have it set up for a site, you just hit a button and you're in. You put in like a username maybe, and you hit a button. I don't even think you need to put a username in because it'll give you a list.
Well, it'll give you as soon as you like tap on the field, it'll load up. Oh, do you want to use this username? And then fills it
exactly
and logs you in with one
button. And it's really cool. And last year they introduced it and had one video about it real briefly. This year, it's actually available. Like it's not in just the weird testing mode like it was last year. Mm-hmm. You can actually build it now. You can build on it now. I saw online some people were building little test websites.
Yeah, that'll be I mean, it's not relevant for what we're doing for
Yeah.
our little side project here, but yeah,
But it's very cool.
it's very cool.
Although Aaron, you had a point you made earlier before we started officially recording.
Oh, just about the not really talking about like creating accounts. We're all talking about like moving over accounts.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, I did. I know. I didn't notice that until you said it. I'm like, that's true. I don't think the demo actually.
they didn't address it. I don't know. I haven't like looked into the
I
standard, so
think
maybe
it would
it's.
yeah, I guess it's weird because like you have to go whatever the web interface or whatever interface you have to do, you still have to identify like, okay, like at some point you have to put in a username and a password, and that whole flow.
Well, I mean,
is
maybe
always unique in every website, right? So
maybe you just put in a username and then it generates a key.
Yeah, it could do that. I don't know.
If you didn't have an account, so if you start from scratch, and if you're not starting from scratch, then you're like some out of band authentication. So it's like if we're at a university or something, you're giving everybody access. You probably are handing out accounts to people. They're not necessarily signing up. They're maybe activating accounts.
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to give them some kind of temporary credential.
Mm-hmm.
So there's still going to be places, I think, where people are going to have something akin to a password they're going to type in, but maybe only really temporarily, like just to bootstrap the process, and then you never have to worry about it again.
Right. I think I mean, yeah, I guess we can, I guess, do we have anything else we want to?
Well, Swift charts.
Swift charts was the other thing.
Yeah,
I could talk forever about app intents. Also, there's like tons more things, but I don't know if we move on. So.
Yeah,
I guess we'll move on from there. But I think the other thing that the other broad, like there were a lot of sessions around AR, and there were a lot of sessions around Metal for reasons.
Well, there's like new what's it called, geometry shader.
Mm-hmm.
Thing you can actually like do procedurally generated geometry like in your shaders. Before you could just like warp surfaces a little bit.
Okay.
And you only knew about like a little localized patch that your shader was working on. Now you can get like the whole geometry and like generate stuff. Right. So that's not I'm an expert on shaders or anything, but it's...
Do you know who might be an expert? 88 winner Curtis. Slopes app. I uses some custom shaders, right?
Yeah. I mean, that guy is...
Sounded useful. They were talking about, like, generating, like, procedurally generated fur on this, bunny.
I mean...
That's what that video is.
That bunny that they always use for all, like, 3D projects. It's like a sample.
I think I joked with Curtis a while back about, like, you could now... Because he was actually accessing some weather API at the time, and he was like, you can add like snow effects or stuff like that, and base it off of like this, whatever if it's like flurry, you can like have the particles come down faster and that kind of stuff. I don't know if he ever jumped on that idea or not, but now, like, I know, knowing him and knowing that he would be jumping on that kind of like, now I have access to the weather API, and theoretically maybe it'll be cheaper, maybe I will do that. That kind of like interesting particle effects
I didn't watch any of the AR ones yet.
Mm-hmm.
I was surprised though that there wasn't more stuff earlier in the week, right? It looked like
you can get AR in 4K now.
Oh, yes. Really?
Yeah.
Okay, well that's like a TV kind of thing.
And you can capture like do like vision stuff like in real time with like while the AR session is going.
Yeah.
Probably not with my iPhone, but
yeah, so you can do like text recognition and like object recognition. Like
nice.
I think it's using like one of the other camera sensors or something.
So why would you need AR in 4K?
I don't
I
know.
don't know.
Some mystery new device.
It's a mystery why you need that. But
Apple would not make a new device.
I know.
Crazy talk.
It's like, actually, did you guys? I know we want to talk about Swift charts a little bit. But did you guys see the Daring Fireball, the talk show live?
No, I still have to see that one with Craig. Craig and Greg. I forgot their last names. Craig Fenerigi and Greg Osh or something.
Yeah, I can't ever pronounce the name either.
Yeah,
and but John asked him like that. He's like, he made a joke about the car thing when he talked about CarPlay. It's like, it's not like you guys are ever gonna make a car or something. It was very funny.
What was their reaction?
Like kind of awkward silence, trying to play it off. Mm-hmm. But everybody, it's like an open secret, but they can't say anything for sure.
I mean, it makes a lot of sense. But they do have to like cater to like, okay, if you have an Android device, like you can't have an Apple car that doesn't support Android in some form of capacity through CarPlay.
I don't know, man. They claim 70-something odd % of new car buyers are very specific about it. If you're a new car buyer, you according to whatever their stats are, vast majority of new car buyers want CarPlay.
What happens if your car has to reboot? Like that was
Ask Tesla owners.
That was like the joke in Tesla, right? It's just like just midway through your highway, all of a sudden your car just completely reboots.
Okay.
It's just like
I gotta tell you, I have a really crappy older car. And an airplane coming through, and I have a crappier older car, and it was right before CarPlay. It has what does it have? The Siri integration, they call it. But anyway, I remember using the built-in navigation, which worked with an app, but it was like before CarPlay. But they had like an app you buy, and then you plug it in and a couple on screen. It locked up in the middle of me navigating to DC after I got the car, and it just didn't come back, and I had to actually reboot my car. So it wasn't even an electric car. I think I had to turn off my car, open the door. I had to get the infotainment system to completely reboot. I had to literally reboot my car. So it happened even on a 10-year-old car that doesn't even have CarPlay. So I'm actually fine with Apple if taking over some of that software because it's all garbage in cars today.
I don't know if there was anything else interesting.
You forgot about lock screen widgets.
Yeah, we've got
widgets. Yeah,
that's probably the biggest thing normal people are going to encounter.
Yeah, for users, it's the biggest thing they'll see on their phone.
Also applicable to us to some degree, but
yeah,
it's essentially just the widgets from Watch, right? Like the same API.
Yeah,
it's complications.
Yeah. The other, I mean, there are like nice things, but if we're talking about like not feature related, really nice things they updated with Xcode. It's a little bit faster. The live preview for SwiftUI is a little bit better. A little more like you can now like see a lot of. You don't have to like pre-configure in your preview. The views.
Not for it. It has some built-in. It has some buttons so you can just bring up some common previews you would want, like light mode and dark mode. Also, the one that was really useful, I think, is the different font size one.
Yeah.
Or the dynamic size, because that one comes up with like a dozen screens.
Yeah.
So you can
Although
see how things look.
I will say, my Intel Mac is just like, it's just like, what are you doing? Just refuses to load any of those live previews. And it's like, I can't tell if this is beta or it's just typical like Mac, where it's just like, okay, obviously
Intel never worked very well with SwiftUI stuff.
No, it's really meant for the Apple Silicon. But again, my favorite thing though was just two more things I want to talk about. My favorite thing was probably the Swift charts, actually, because it was an example of them expanding their APIs using the kind of SwiftUI way of doing things. Mm-hmm. Like it fits in with SwiftUI very well.
Wait, that was your big thing?
That was one of the big things I liked about it because
Swift Regex.
Also Swift Regex, but I didn't get to look at that one too much yet. I'll tell you, Regex is great. You can use them both. You can parse the input and then I don't know. But no, I like Swift charts because it's easy to use, and I think it's gonna makes it easy to do charts because charts are always a pain in the butt. But I liked it also because it's an example of Apple putting their money where their mouth is. I guess they said we're gonna build a new charting API and it's gonna work with SwiftUI. Like this is the way, and it's very cool. But yeah, Regex is also great. The thing about Regex I like was that you can have them just as just inline. Mm-hmm. Just like Perl, like it gave me flashbacks when I used old school Perl programming, and I would just have regexes sitting there on the screen. And then it has this builder syntax, like the regex. Again, a lot of things coming from SwiftUI this year. Like anything that's like a builder thing, where it's like a function, and it's just like these lines of like I don't know, like a little DSL language. Anything that's like a builder is kind of like that, like View Builder.
Yeah,
is and from SwiftUI, they seem to be modeling stuff based on that. I think the Regex one works that way too. It's not like, I don't think it's straight up object oriented, is it? I didn't look at it closely enough, but I thought they had like a builder type syntax. But what's pretty cool is that you can take some completely impenetrable regex and translate it into this new more, I don't know, elaborate syntax and understand it a little better.
I mean, I think one of the things I've seen a lot of the talks around, aside from that, the only thing that I've noticed that they spent a lot of time was sort of like cross-platform and iPad, Mac specific type of like UI. Like this is the way we do nav bars and toolbars, and this is how you can make it work on the other platforms. And then,
navigation was big. That was the other really big thing.
Was a big one.
They fixed navigation like we asked for.
Yes, right. They now have navigation stack, which I still haven't really played too deeply around because I'm just frightened to have to rip out all my pre-existing nav view code.
The navigation stack is cool. They did show how you can you can move between the current API for navigation link to the, what do they call it, the value based one.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then the other thing about navigation I liked was the cross-platform nature, as you mentioned. So they did a lot of emphasis on that. There's some stuff in there like navigation split view is an example, which you use that and then it will look up, it'll size itself appropriately for an iPhone, for an iPad screen, for macOS.
Wait, so that it goes into sort of like a main detail view, like for like a list view detail view for if you're iPhone, and so you basically push into detail view.
Yeah.
It by default, but if you're on the iPad, it will be like, it'll have that little sidebar in the top, that sidebar icon in the top left. If you're in portrait mode, if you're in landscape mode, then it's a sidebar, right?
Yep.
And then there's the content view or detail view, whatever we gonna call it. And then on the Mac kind of reflects the iPad, generally speaking, in terms of user experience, right?
Yeah, like 80% or whatever. It's yeah. I was running before this Xcode beta. I was running the iPad version of the app and like the Mac version, and to see how the split view stuff worked before before WWDC. Yeah, pretty close. There's some differences, but it's nice that you have the one view. You just set it up in SwiftUI, and then there you go. Everything just kind of, at least you have a good starting point. Everything just kind of works across the platforms. So they made a big push for that, which is good. I think I just like that there's some kind of focus now on like Apple's advice about how to move forward with doing cross-platform work, and we don't have to build necessarily like a separate storyboard for every freaking device.
I mean, it's kind of like a pro and con in that. I do agree on the sense of like the personality of each platform is always, like I know like a lot of old school AppKit developers would feel a certain way just because it just feels very, I don't know, not non-Mac-y on some level, or there's just that sort of like slight disconnect mentally of like, oh, this is not how like. There's a feel to a Mac app comparatively to like an iOS app that is distinctly Mac, and I think that's what a lot of Mac developers kind of mourn, in my mind.
I can see a lot of old school Mac heads feeling like they're going to lose platform distinction, and they have a point.
Yeah,
because I mean, but on the other hand. The cross-platform stuff still like lets you bring software to the Mac that otherwise wouldn't.
I mean, one of the things that I would find interesting to explore, and I think that's the part that I sort of would kind of push back on, is this idea of like, well, what can you do on this Mac platform that you can still keep or even provide a much more distinct feel, right? Like, when I bring my iPad app to the Mac, right? What am I adding? What is going to give the Mac app a slight edge in the experience? that I can still provide on the
I don't
Mac.
think Apple's saying you shouldn't do that. I think they're saying they're just giving tools so you can get 70% of the way, 80% of the way of something working.
Sure.
But there's definitely still platform-specific stuff. I mean, the one that comes to my mind would be like AppleScript.
Mm-hmm.
If you're a type of app that does that, there's a lot of scriptability that you can do on the Mac you can't do on iOS. Now, shortcuts exist, but shortcuts is much more limited in kind of automation than straight up AppleScript is.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about shortcuts is that you can, there is a way to communicate with AppleScript on the Mac shortcuts. So you can integrate AppleScript into a shortcut if you wanted to. So providing that.
But just on the Mac, right?
Yes, just on the Mac. One thing that I think would be interesting from a year's, not interesting, but like common tools that you would expect from like drag and drop, pinpoint precision, that kind of stuff that you would want to do on the Mac versus like maybe like the iPad is, the iPhone is much more touch oriented. I think it could be expressed a little bit better on the Mac. Key commands, like not everybody has a $300 keyboard cover for their iPad, right? Yeah. So I think that's an advantage that you would always have on the Mac.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's just a wealth of there's whole sets of tools like development tools and
sure,
and the highest end artistic tools you just can't duplicate on iPad.
Or even just like the amount of time you spend, right? Like, I mean, good grief, we spent 8 hours a day at work in front of a computer, most likely a Mac in our case, versus like we don't have, we're not going to do that on an iPad or an iPhone, right? So
no, although other people might so, and there are people that keep wanting full on Xcode on the iPad. Geez. Although you have Playgrounds, I saw the Playgrounds talk. Mm-hmm. The one where build I think it was this year's one. It was build an app and publish it to test flight, and I was like, wow. And the people had said, I remember someone had told us, I think it was at Philly Coca, that the autocomplete and stuff in Playgrounds was really, really fast.
Yeah,
I could see it in the demo. I was like, whoa.
Yeah, like it's amazingly fast. It's absurdly fast. Yeah, live preview and autocomplete is just like. No, like maybe that's because I'm on an Intel Mac when I'm doing Xcode, but on my iPad, it is like wicked fast.
Yeah, so it's cool. I mean, I was still a little unclear about. You do need a developer account to release it, right? Or no? Because like I don't know how does that work? Because they put it into this test flight in the. But can you put something in test flight without having a developer account now? I'm not sure.
I think you still need a quote-unquote developer account, but you don't need to pay for it, is my...
Right, but you do have to put it in the store, right?
Yes, you still need to do that. But then that's when you sign in. You would still sign in to the account to upload it to TestFlight, for example. So you still need to go through that process of like making an account, but not necessarily... You don't necessarily... I'm not sure if you have to pay for it still. That's a fair question. But I think that's a question for another day, because we have other obligations and other things that we have to think about, like our side project. And a lot of things have, because of WWDC, I think we have looked at, I'm sort of looking at this as an opportunity for us to sort of, not necessarily pivot, but sort of figure out what is in WWDC that we can take and sort of decide to integrate into this to-do list app that we're working on.
Yeah, so it's funny. We thought WWDC22 was going to be all about augmented reality, and we were going to be like, oh man, how we're going to have to like abandon this or something, but it turns out that WWDC was a lot about internal, like a lot of SwiftUI updates, a lot of updates to just make development, cross-platform development better. And so it looks like we actually have a really good side project idea to be able to play with and implement some of these new APIs. And so we wanted to build, we always wanted to build like a Mac app. That was the whole purpose of this. Right. And now it looks like we might be able to just do a multi-platform app. about as easily as we thought we were going to do before. Like, so and use some of these new APIs. So we're going to go like all in on iOS 16, macOS, Ace Ventura, and the only downside is I think we do have to install macOS Ventura.
Yeah, if we're going to do a Mac, like especially exclusive iOS 16, whatever latest version of Mac, what the number?
macOS 13, you can call
macOS 13.
Yeah, I keep thinking Ace Ventura Pet Detective every time I hear the name.
Like those, because here's the thing: we are committed to building, because it's a new app. We're committed to building it on an iOS 16 exclusive platform. So we're not worried about backwards compatibility. We don't care about that. This is iOS exclusive, iOS 16 exclusive. On top of which is also Mac Ventura exclusive.
Yeah.
Having said all that, we don't want to install Mac Ventura too early because it's one thing to put it on your test device or something, but like we only have
I only have the one M1 Mac. I did back up my drive with Carbon Copy Cloner.
Sure.
So and there's instructions on the release notes for Xcode on how or the OS, one or the other. I think it might be the OS one. There's some instructions from Apple about creating a volume. Because now we have APFS, you can create non-destructive volumes. And I saw a video on YouTube of someone doing this. It wasn't that hard. So if you have enough space, you should be able to create a volume and then install it onto that internally and not.
That's the question. How much space do you need?
I was probably, I have like half a terabyte left on here. I was probably going to give it like 128. Like it doesn't need, how much do we need just to run Xcode?
So I've done this.
Already?
I've done this in the past in my prior in the prior version. So I think I had installed Big Sur. I partitioned my hard drive. I think my hard drive was about like 512.
Yeah.
So basically what I did is I partitioned my hard drive, and it's easy to do safely. At least for me it was.
Disk utility, right?
Yeah, using disk utility. And then I install. It's just a little. It's not particularly. It's not particularly obvious, which because when you split it, it's kind of like splits in a weird way, and the naming convention is a little weird. But then when you install it, so you basically download the installer through. At the time that I did it, they had this funky way of doing it through the App Store. And then you open up the installer, and then you point to the drive you want to install it on. And then once it's installed, you can close and do whatever. And the way I did it was initially I did I partitioned it to give myself about maybe 100 gigs. I forgot exactly the amount at the time because you have to have enough storage for the operating system, right? So the new version of the OS and Xcode.
And Xcode's pretty big.
And Xcode's pretty big, like absurdly big. Sometimes.
That's why I was thinking 128. I don't want to use up all of my space, but 128 I thought might be big enough.
128 is reasonable, especially if you're not trying. Especially if you're not trying to build, you're not trying to make any huge project. Like you're pretty sure your project's going to be pretty, reasonably lightweight.
I think that might work. I have some more space than that on here, but I don't want to eat up all of my remaining space because it's basically there for video editing off of the drive. I can do that off of an external drive. I have to. You could do it, I think, off of an external drive, but M1 stuff, Apple Silicon stuff is weird. Mm-hmm. I think you might need to have like a Thunderbolt drive or something. I was reading online, people were trying to do this, I think, last year, and doing it on external drive was harder to get it to work. And a few years ago, I did it on Intel Mac, and it was super slow anyway. So maybe if you had like a Thunderbolt drive, you could do it. But I don't have that, so I'm gonna have to do it internally.
I'm not willing to risk my Intel iMac this time for whatever reason. I'm just being, it's much more like it's so time consuming that I almost am willing to just wait it out until closer to the deadline.
Right, that's the other thing. We could work on the iOS, iPadOS, and because we're using the latest APIs, theoretically, it buys us a lot of support in the macOS side, and then we can pivot to macOS when maybe like when the public beta comes out. Depends on when. One of the other things is macOS sometimes doesn't come out at the same time iOS and iPadOS do.
Oh, you're right. Yeah.
So it's like, we want to make sure we're ready to go at launch for the biggest platforms, which is going to be iOS and iPadOS. Mm-hmm. And then macOS, if we have to tweak it, I know Mac people are probably like, but it's what it is. It's like we're just a side project, so it's going to be it's funny because we started this to want to do a macOS app, and we do, but if we're going to target macOS 13, it's possible. I'm not saying it's likely or anything. It's possible we might have to make that focus on the iOS side,
but
until later.
The great thing is that gives us time, because I think a lot of our current capacity is that we all sort of have pseudo full-time jobs.
I have an actual full-time job. That's pseudo.
We work full-time hours. Let's put it that way. And so our capacity is really limited to weekends and maybe like a few hours per night if we're committed.
Yeah, which is why I like the changes they made this year, especially to navigation and and the widgets and stuff. The focus on cross-platform stuff felt like they were speaking to us.
Yes,
like Apple was like, "Hey, we heard you're working on a side project that's going to target multiple platforms. Mm-hmm. Have we got some stuff you want to look at?"
So, timeline-wise, I'm proposing this idea of having our iOS iPad app for September, mid-September, late September deadline. That would be the goal, to get the iOS version of the app out by then. And then while the iOS app is out, that's when we'll probably install and sort of really add the install venture, and for which then we can then make the macOS app. So the funny thing is, now in the new version of Xcode, you can create one target and then have it target multiple platforms. So in that one target, you can say, I want iPhone, iPad, and maybe that's it. But then you can also easily add Mac. And then in SwiftUI, you would just sort of adjust using macros to sort of like say, if the target is Mac, add this menu bar item or something like that in the code.
So can we actually build it for Mac and then turn off that target in order to release?
That's good. See, that's the question mark in my mind, because you can't turn it off as it is more like a item in a list that you either add or remove. So I guess you can remove that target, the Mac part of that target, and hide it. There's no way to disable it. I don't see a way to disable it at the moment.
My question is it's like, if macOS release does not coincide with iOS and iPadOS, and you're building a cross-platform app, targeting them, can you release it? Or like, is there a way to release it just on iPad and iOS? Or like, what I mean? Like, I'm not 100% sure. It used to be, not sure how easy that was.
They were different targets, so it's easier to and then you had to submit them different at the iOS and a macOS for target a build, I should say. Yeah, for each target. So that is a good question.
We have to look into that more on the documentation. Maybe though. Maybe too bad we didn't actually think about this while they were having the digital lounges. We could have asked.
Well, I'm sure every Mac developer right now that's actually listening is just screaming at us right now. What it is.
Yeah, we didn't say we knew anything about macOS development. This is like
so if you're a Mac developer and you know the answer, leave it in the comments below. Oh wait, we don't have a YouTube channel, so you can't do it. Oh,
rubbing salt in the wound.
Yeah, coffee's really kicking in now. Sorry, didn't mean that.
Nice. But anyway, I think the plan's pretty good. We have some time to figure out the logistics, but we're not going to abandon the macOS app or anything.
No,
I just think that we'll start with using structures that are more cross-platform by default, and then build the specifics onto the platform when we have a better idea of how we might release it.
So I actually wrote a Trello board of just a broad schedule for how we're going to do this. So now, from an accountability standpoint, this is what I set us up for. June would be finalizing the layout and the UI flow. So we'd have a basic idea of just how this app will look and act. July will be the implementation of those UI, like sort of the layout, assuming that we've agreed upon it on principle. And I've posted a sketch file for us to sort of work through. And then August would be sort of like the revision refinement month, where we're sort of like tweak and refine and, you know, polish the app and sort of test and debug that as we go. And September will be the time where we like finishing touches, debugging, you know, all that stuff will happen there, and then we will release it when iOS 16 comes out. Assuming that from there we would focus on the Mac implementation of that, you know, adding, you know, all the Mac's niceties, key commands, maybe some menu bar items.
I mean, a lot of that stuff you can do on iPad now. So
yeah,
right.
For the menu.
Yep.
Well, I mean, yeah, that's why
stuff.
Yeah, exactly. That's why we're thinking of doing it for targeting the latest and greatest stuff, because it's surprising how much of that stuff is now kind of cross-platform. Right. iPad is just so much like becoming more like a weird version of macOS in some ways.
Right. Well, that's the thing, right? Like I've actually installed it on my the iOS 16 beta on my iPad Pro, so I'm already all in on.
I still don't have an iPad, so hopefully that's not a problem.
Well,
I have a mini, and you know what? It kind of works fine, but I don't have like an M1, so I can't use the Stage Manager thing.
Yeah, I have. I mean, on some level, like Stage Manager is still. I feel like it's still like not quite baked through yet because it's very janky. I can't tell if a good chunk of it is because the apps that I'm like navigating through it hasn't.
You have an M1 Pro?
Yeah, I do.
Nice.
So, but it's still like the windows don't quite correct themselves at the right timing, and so that's the part that.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's beta. I've seen some video reviews of Stage Manager, and people are pointing out like animations are janky in places and things like that. It's like the first beta, though. I mean,
yeah, that's to be expected. Like,
yeah, I expect everything, but I'm actually surprised things aren't more broken.
Well, like the app intents that don't work at all.
Yeah, they don't work at all.
Well, at least as far as I can tell.
Yeah. Don't install beta software on your carry devices, people.
Yeah, Curtis, don't install it.
No, I think he is.
He did.
He did. I saw some Twitter exchange.
I joked about it on Twitter with him about like
I'm thinking about doing it.
No. Well,
I can't do it. I can't because if my phone gets screwed up and I can't, for instance, something like 2-factor didn't work or whatever, or 1Password failed or something like that, like I'd be so screwed.
I wouldn't mind if I didn't have a few contracts that I still have to make sure that I have to support that. So I want to make sure that I'm using, you know, like, because the other thing too is like Xcode 13.4 doesn't work in Ventura. Like they block you from using it. So it's like, okay, like I need that to work. So I'm not going to install it. That's another reason why I don't want to install it on my Mac.
It's another sign though that this is kind of a turning point, a demarcation line or something in terms of the future of development of the platform.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's just coincidental, and I don't know. Maybe they just didn't want to support it just because they don't want people running. I don't know. But it feels like it's like before you could run the old versions of Xcode, right? At least at first. So
yeah. So I mean, I'm sort of at this point. I'm like, geez, I need to get myself an M2 and M2 laptop and get on board.
I want a midnight MacBook Air. That thing looks nice.
I have to take a look at that in the store. I'm not quite sold on it, but I want to wait till they come out and then see it in the Apple Store, get a real feel for it, and then kind of go, okay, like I'm on board or I'm not on board. Like, okay, like which model that I think I would want to buy, and then, you know, open up my Apple Card and
you can get a Mac Mini with M1 for cheap. You can get a current MacBook Air cheap too for like $800. You look around Amazon hard enough.
Yeah, I don't know. There's a it's one of those like I could, but on some level I would just rather just go to the Apple Store and get it, or order it directly from Apple. But who knows? Who knows? Maybe I'll find a good deal.
But we all need Apple Silicon.
Yes. That
pretty
is
clear.
Apparently that's very clear. Actually, that would actually help me if I get an Apple. I was thinking about getting for the next laptop would be a MacBook Air, and the M2 does look like a very interesting product. So TBD. Cool. So but again, so basically, are we good with the schedule? This sort of
we had a schedule before, and that didn't go anywhere. So
I know
we're good. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, it didn't go anywhere, but that was But the problem was
it was a little bit too ambitious.
It was a little ambitious, and with WWDC coming up, we kind of got distracted. But this is good. This is like the time where I'm most motivated of the year. When there's new stuff that just came
wasn't
out.
For this weird thing of trying to develop everything on beta software.
Yeah, that's the one.
We'll see how that goes.
Downside. At least Xcode runs for iOS and iPadOS without updating the Ventura.
Yeah, well, the thing that's the reason why I'm like, okay, I'll focus on just the iOS and the iPad, and I've sort of committed myself to making sure the iPadOS version is going to be good and solid, because that's the closest to the Mac experience.
Oh my God, we're just angering the Mac developers like left and right today. Like, it's not the same.
Yeah,
I know. We know.
It's one of those things where it's because we're so new to it. I think that's the part of this journey that I think people have to understand, is that we're learning as we go, and we're trying to this is sort of like the accountability podcast in a lot of ways, of like saying, okay, and a lot of people who haven't done Mac development hopefully could get something out of it in terms of like, okay, here they've gone through these pain points, they're seeing these things with fresh eyes, and maybe that'll give some insight as well from a Mac developer point of view, like, okay, like these guys are coming in sort of, kind of like, like children in many ways, of just like with a child's eye.
We are like children.
Yes, very much so.
So you've actually started a UI sketch in the app Sketch, which you shared with us, which is doesn't have much in there yet, but it's progress is being made there.
I think it's one of those things where the good thing about doing it in Sketch is like it's almost like making commitments of like saying, this is what I think it is, and then we can sort of communicate like where in your mind, like this will probably have to happen off audio or off video, whatever. Is that we sort of discuss like what we were envisioning for this to-do list app, or this goal based app.
Yeah, we did implement a basic model and core data that is more advanced than we started with.
Right.
That we're trying to narrow down. As I said before, we're trying to create something that's a little different than the standard to-do app. Because that's, if we just followed one of those tutorials, we'd be done by now. There's a ton of them, but we were trying to do something a little bit different.
Well, I think one of the things that I think we're all dangerous enough to make an app. I think the challenge is like, well, at least the way I look at it is like, it's fine to do a to-do list app, and there are plenty out there. There's no reason to build another one. It's like reinventing the wheel 10,000 times, right? But there's a lot of itches to scratch from my point of view about learning of doing a to-do list app that was catered just for me, or just for us in this case.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, productivity and task management and goal management, all these types of areas, there's no one way of doing them that's going to work for everybody in every situation. So that's why people implement these apps over and over again. Mm-hmm. That's why there's so many of them that are able to succeed on the app stores.
Sure, yeah. And so that's the thing the takeaway that I wanted to get out of it is like, if we make this app, we finish this app, it's on the App Store.
As long as we're using it.
Yeah, as long as we're using it, that to me is what matters.
Yeah, and that's what we're trying to focus on. And it's tough. As I said, if we just followed a standard tutorial that like there's a billion of them, like make a to-do app for iOS or whatever. You could be done. Right. Have been done in a week. I mean, like they're literal tutorials for it, but we're trying to design something a little different that works for us and combine some ideas that we've been messing with. And that's one of the things I think with software development. If you're new to it, maybe you don't grasp this, but most of the time it's not coding. You're thinking about it, you're discussing it, you're designing things, you're going through iterations long before you actually write any code. I mean, ideally, because despite the fact it feels like just spinning your wheels, you're not, because you are making progress on defining the thing you're building. But if you build code and then you decide, well, that was completely wrong, I have to fundamentally change this architecture, that's a lot more work than just scrapping your sketch design and starting over there, or changing your basic model that you made out or something. It's just the earlier in the process you make changes, the better, is what I'm saying. So that's where you want the most churn. Yeah,
I mean, just some thought of going. I think I remember a friend of mine, Joel Eden, who is a sort of like a UX guy. He always talks about it from an animator's point of view, or like sort of like storyboarding this the user experience, storyboarding like how this gets used in the real world, and just trying to get a sense of like what is the problem I'm trying to solve, kind of like that point of view, versus like what's the fancy new API that I want to hit, like, oh, I want to learn how to do. I mean, yes, we want to code it the right way, but at the same time we're trying, if we're building something, like, why are we building it, right? It's always to solve some problem.
Yeah. And defining the problem is not always easy.
No.
Like, and to define it in a way that you can then write up software around, like that's where the challenge comes in software development.
Sure. Yeah. Cool. Well, I think we could cut it off for today. I don't necessarily. Do you have any not a sponsor that you want to give a shout out to, or?
Oh man, let's see. One of our recent ones won an award, so I can't.
Oh yeah, okay. That's a good one. That's a good one. Do you have It's Curtis Herbert's Slopes app at getslopes.com. Is that
yeah?
That's the one. Hashtag getslopes. There we go.
Didn't we do slopes before?
We did slopes before, so this is almost like a repeat, but it's bear repeating. He just won an ADA award, so congratulations to you.
Apple Design Awards, for those that are not aware. It's pretty big deal in our community.
Mm-hmm. And we know how long and how long he's worked on it, how much love and attention he's put into it. So again, congratulations to you, Curtis.
Congratulations, Curtis. I'm very happy for him. Actually, I was excited when he won. I was telling everybody I knew, like, really, somebody won an award? I was like, yeah, he's awesome. And the app is cool. Especially if you, I mean, I have never actually used it, but no, I played it with it, but I don't ski. That's my problem.
I don't think any of us snowboard or ski. I've never.
We're all terrible. Yeah, we don't ski or snowboard, but the people that do love the app, and it's well designed. Hence, even Apple recognizes how well designed it is. So check it out. Getslopes.com.
We've certainly watched the evolution of that app.
Oh God, I was thinking back to when I first joined FiliCoca, and he was showing off early builds of that, or relatively early versions of that, and how far it's come.
Yeah,
it's remarkable. Just that's what the power of consistent effort and careful execution.
Yeah,
he's consistently working on this and is thinking strategically and implementing things with a long view.
Sure.
So he's a very inspirational guy.
Yes, very much so. All right. Well, that's all we have for today. You can learn more about FiliCoco at filicoco.org. There you'll find links to our Slack, meetup schedule, and contact info. If you're feeling generous, please leave a rating and review on Apple Podcast and share with us with all your developer friends. And one more thing. Small minds are concerned with the extraordinary. Great minds with the ordinary. That's a Pascal quote. And until next time, Let's see. What was I supposed to say? Till next time, good luck on your developer journey. We will cheer for you always.
We had a schedule before, and that didn't go anywhere. So we'll see what happens.